Hello, good evening and welcome. I'm John Drummond, your host for the next 60 exciting minutes. As always, we have a great show for you on the TNT Show. And welcome to everyone watching and listening. It's been another great day for British democracy. We learned today, for example, that the British government is spending no less than £180 million on consultants. What are these consultants going to do, you ask? Well, apparently they're going to help deliver Brexit. A no-deal Brexit by the looks of it, by all accounts. Now, you ask yourself, didn't we used to have a civil service that did this? Is this another civil? Or perhaps, and I have no means of knowing this is true or not, perhaps the civil service don't want to do some of this work, and therefore they have to go outside and hire consultants. So we're paying twice over for the same thing, as it were. Crazy, absolutely crazy. Look, I said we have another great guest tonight, and I'm really excited that she's here with us. Tonight, the TNT Show welcomed Sophie Johnson. Now, she's pictured behind me with her sister, Sarah, who unfortunately can't join us, but she's a great excuse. She's in Australia. So hopefully she'll be watching us tonight. And if not, we've got this show on YouTube. Anybody can watch it anytime. Sarah is in this iconic post-referendum photograph behind me. And we'll be, by the way, taking your questions live. And Sarah will be talking about the night it all happened and how she felt as a 16-year-old holding up the Psalter with a rather antagonistic crowd behind her, as you can see. So, The Nation Talks. It's your show. Write in with your questions. You've got the details on the screen. We're more than happy to take any questions you might care to ask us. Now to our guest tonight. The Nation Talks to Sophie Johnson. How are you, Sophie? How are you coping with the pandemic?
Hiya, John. Thanks very much for having me on the show. To be honest, apart from, a few friends who've become a little bit ill and, just general worry about older relatives, I've come out of it pretty unscathed. I'm certainly lucky I'm not a first year at university. I'm in third year myself. But I think I would have found it very trying being a first year in university halls in Glasgow, particularly. Murano student village, for example, was put under heavy lockdown restrictions, and many didn't have access to laundry or food for several days, had to be reduced to washing their clothes in the bath, etc. It was just an absolute nightmare and so unorganised. I mean, these sometimes 17-year-olds had come from a different city, told that they were going to have blended learning, and then come to Glasgow and locked in with no mental health support at all, and purely because they were needed there for the profit of the universities. It was just a terrible, terrible outcome that could have been very much foreseen.
Yeah. What do you think should have been done?
Well, the thing is, I think both the Scottish Government and the university management had a proper idea that this was going to happen. You lock loads of students in the same place, especially if they're in first year. And during, in the middle of a pandemic, and you expect social distancing or you expect a second wave not to come, is just entirely ludicrous. So what they really should have done is not advertise student halls, COVID-safe student halls, to people from around the world, brought them over, and then locked them in. It's just, and some of the measures were really, really horrible as well. I mean, we got an email out, and so this was largely targeted at Hall students, but told that if you broke any rules, you'd be expelled, essentially. And it's the worst start to university experience ever. Just absolutely outrageous. And then what even is worse is that because it hit Glasgow first, you'd think that for elsewhere in the UK they might have seen it and maybe listened, and all the anger in these student halls, and just kind of went, maybe we shouldn't do the same thing. Yeah. It was just an absolute nightmare for first year students. Honestly, I feel for them.
And you've been to visit them, haven't you? You've checked them out. How are they coping now?
Yeah, so when I went to Murano, it was, I think, maybe last month. And some of them were coming out of isolation, but quite a few flats were still in isolation. We were just kind of helping some kind of groups, like hand out food boxes, etc. And it was just quite strange. So you obviously knock on the door, and these like apartments are essentially, they're not made for students to live in. They're basically a place for you to crash at the end of the night once you've been studying or partying. Yeah. I think they're actually designed by the same people that have designed some prisons. So they are like essentially prison blocks. And it was pretty surreal, like knocking on the doors, going like 2 meters back and being like, do you want some food? And these like teenagers are just like a bit kind of bewildered about the whole thing, kind of just, and I ask, how are you doing, etc. And they're just like, I don't really know. I don't really know what's going on.
Yeah.
I mean, there was some action in Glasgow in that a rent strike was organised, and there was some kind of compensation, but not really enough.
Yeah.
So, they got 50 quid to spend on food and a month's back rent, but it wasn't really fair. So, a lot of people at universities are trying to organise.
Tell me how people cope, though. I mean, how do you get food if you're stuck? How do you get fed?
So for the first 3 days, basically, people really had nothing because they were kind of slapped with a kind of, you have to stay in here.
Yeah.
And then for the first 3 days, they didn't really have much access to food because they were kind of told you need to arrange your own slot for, Tesco deliveries, etc.
Oh, okay.
And so it was very hard for everyone to find a slot at the same, on the same time. So a lot of people were really struggling the first few days. Things got a little bit better after that, but still it was very difficult to have deliveries to your flat, especially if you're a COVID infected flat. So I think it was really quite stressful for some people being so far away from home as well, and paying ridiculous amounts of rent as well that have almost doubled in the last 6 years.
Yeah.
It was just a massive. It was just idiocy, really, how they'd set this up.
Yeah. I suppose one blessing is that many of them don't have to pay fees. I assume that the fees are covered by the Scottish government. Is that the case or no?
Well, yeah, but there's a lot of English students and a lot of EU students or students from elsewhere, and they do have to pay. But also, if you consider what student loan is, which is about £480 a month, and then rent is just almost about the same. So it's kind of students aren't able to work. So it's a total assumption that students have families that will give them money, and that's just not the case for everyone.
How do you think people are coping now that they're well into it, as it were?
Well, I think people are coping a lot better. I think, especially at the start, people weren't very politicised, but they didn't understand that, this isn't just student life. They should deserve, a kind of better quality of care. Yeah. But I think now that students are allowed to meet, and there's less restrictions, that there's some kind of politicising going on, and kind of some action hopefully will be taken.
Okay. Well, there's a good chance. I mean, I don't want to scare anyone, but there's a good chance that that we may be heading for another lockdown. Who knows? How confident are you that the arrangements are in place to cope with that, or do you feel that it might result in a reprise of what happened before?
To be honest, I'm not confident at all, because as it stands, as soon as you move into university accommodation, that's you part of a household, and you're not allowed to visit another household.
Okay.
I think a lot of students will, or are trying to get out of their accommodation. But the problem is that you sign a contract, and that doesn't kind of relieve you of what you have to pay. So it's a kind of way up of, do I try and escape, which is technically not allowed, or and keep on paying, or just stay put. So it's quite a difficult decision for people, and there's not really that much focus on it at the moment. I mean, there is it is kind of like, oh, students might not be allowed back for Christmas, but there's not that much of a, how do we let students go back for Christmas? Because Christmas can be an isolating time for anyone who's not with their family or friends. But if you're, in a new city with people that you don't really know, it's kind of going to be worse.
Yeah. Maybe there's something that ordinary citizens in various university cities can do, because, I'm not sure everyone understands the plight that you've just outlined, and maybe it needs a bit more publicity. Maybe this will help a little bit for people generally to understand a bit more clearly what it's like, because there tends to be a sort of view around, and I'm sure you've heard it, where it's all these middle-class kids, and they've been mollycoddled their whole lives, and here they are having to fend a little bit for their own, and here they are complaining like whatever. They should really sort of count their blessings and all the rest of it. You must have heard that.
Yeah, absolutely. That is a sentiment that exists, but it's not applicable to everyone. Of course, there are kids that are able to have money from their parents, but not everyone has such a stable family. Like, a lot of people come in from, especially actually Glasgow's quite good, and they have a lot of outreach for people with less affluent backgrounds and stuff. Yeah. I mean, despite being a very well respected university, but also there's people stuck in places like college lands, like lots of different kids from various backgrounds kind of together, and they all have different things going on. So I don't know. It's basically, I think you should just assume that that young adults in these situations may have it bad, rather than assume the other way around.
Say that there's folks watching and listening tonight, and they would like to help. Where can they go? Is there a website or whatever that somebody who wants to help out can use?
Well, so it's because I'm part of this student population, I know how I can get involved. But I suppose just kind of any kind of publicity on this, or empathy, or just just getting people to think a little bit different, because there's some really hard situations.
I know, and I suppose there's so many different stories and so many different people affected in so many different ways. It might be difficult, but I mean, if there's one thing that characterises Scotland, it's a tremendous kindness and generosity. And I mean, there will be people watching and listening, thinking to themselves, well, I'd like to do something. So maybe afterwards, if there's some sort of website or telephone number they can call to volunteer, I don't know quite what they might want to do. And I don't want to sort of assume that what people might want to do and what help they might want to give. But if you can think of something that people can get in touch to volunteer, then afterwards let us know, because I think that would be good. We've had some questions coming in. Mary Malloy wants to know, do you think students are taking the restrictions seriously?
I think largely yes. And I think this kind of blame on students is really, really unfair. Although Nicola Sturgeon came out and said, don't blame the students, at the same time the university and the Scottish government came out with a joint statement saying that we will impose kind of like heavy consequences and stuff as like a warning. And I think that just made people feel very, I don't know, infantilized and kind of, I think most people are respecting restrictions, but it's in any group, children, adults of whatever class, etc. Obviously there's going to be some people bending the rules, and it's just really unfair to put it on students.
Well, I would agree with that. I mean, after all, I heard of somebody called Cummings who travelled half the way.
Because he couldn't see.
And his boss thought it was perfectly okay. And then what he did, he held a press conference to explain why he thought it was okay and why no one else should be troubled about it. Okay.
Oh, that was so ridiculous.
It can only happen here. I mean, if I tried to make up that and told people that as a story, say a couple of years ago, that nobody would have taken it seriously.
I know.
They would say, I assume he was fired on the spot. No, he wasn't. Oh, he was given a warning then. No. What happened to him? He went on television. You're kidding. What did his boss say? His boss said it was okay. You're joking.
I know, at least the Scottish government has a sense, when people break the restrictions to kind of be like, hey, resign, But this was just beyond the pale.
But it is a serious point, though, because when people see senior politicians and senior advisors breaking the law, it's then very difficult to progress with a message that says, hey, guys, you all need to behave. Because immediately people think, well, hey, hold on a second. He didn't behave. She didn't behave, and they're still being paid out of the public purse. So it's a difficult one. But hey, we can come back to that if you've got time later. What people really want to know is what happened that night when that picture behind me was taken. Give us the blow by blow, because you were 16 at the time.
Yeah, I was.
Your sister Sarah was what, 20?
20, yeah.
20. So she was big sister. So
yeah.
There she is, holding one part of the Sultan. There you are on the other side, holding the other part. And you were surrounded by gentlemen who'd had, I'm not sure what the polite expression is, one or two shells before they approached you.
Yeah, you could say that. So I suppose going back.
First of all, to go down there?
Well, obviously it'd been a very sad night for a lot of us. I'd stayed up. I was at my parents' and I stayed up, to watch the boats come in. And I was very, very sad in the morning. I think my mum took the brunt of that because she'd voted no. And she came and I was like, shame. So then my sister called me up and I went to hers, and there were a few of us there, and we all were kind of consoling each other. And then we saw on RT that there were a few people in George Square that were still kind of, standing for independence. They had their salt tires, but there was a large group of unionists there. So we kind of picked yourself up and were like, here, it's not over. Let's go down. We'd been at George Square the day before and the day before that. And it was really it was a brilliant, positive place. So, these few people that were there, we were like, let's go join them. So when we got there, it escalated quite a lot. There were a lot more people in the square, particularly unionists, of course. And, so we went to stand with the supporters of Scottish independence. And then the police, they basically started removing people with solitaires from the square, I suppose for our own safety. As kind of the mob started getting a bit bigger, and then they kind of formed a kind of police barricade separating the independent supporters from the unionists, which were much larger and kind of totally swept, taking over the square, with their red hand of Ulster salutes, which obviously were Nazi salutes. And, singing songs like No Surrender, Rule Britannia, that kind of, rhetoric. And So me and my sister were just like, I suppose we were quite like optimistic, and we were very sure of ourselves, like that we are on the right side of history here. And so what we did was we hid our flags under our jumpers, and we went through the Queen Street entrance, and came out on the other side and tried to blend in with the unionists. And then we got to a bit in the square, and we stood up with our flags, and we got quite a lot of aggression, of course. And then we kind of moved a little bit further into the square. And then eventually we felt like we would probably be more stable if we were sitting down, because, people were trying to crowd us over and stuff. And if we were sitting down, we could be quite solid there. Mm-hmm. And, we were very much feeling like this, this is our square too. Like you have no right. We're not doing anything wrong at all. We're just showing our solidarity for the future of the independence movement. And so, we were sitting there, and at one point, a guy, they were spitting at us, throwing stuff at us and all that.
Spitting on you?
Yeah. And I think, maybe people were getting to the point of possible violence. But luckily it never got to that. It was mainly just verbal abuse, spitting at us and throwing stuff. And we were eventually very much surrounded, like, quite heavily by these people who were, drunk and angry and, flying high on whatever mantra they thought suited, I don't know, Ulster kind of nationalist stuff. And and then at one point, a guy, I was holding my own flag. At one point, a guy came down and he grabbed my flag from me. And so I kind of ended up, I held on to it, and I kind of got dragged across the ground for a bit. My sister, fantastically managed to get the flag back off of him. And then I guess at that point, it probably got a bit more aggressive, but there were some people that had managed to get in that were either neutral or maybe just kind of there to see what was going on, and they were trying to defend us. But we were pretty resolute. We were pretty kind of, we're here. This is a public space. We're not gonna reply to these angry, swearing people. We'll say, if you want to have a conversation, that's fine. But what we're doing is we're just exercising our right to kind of peaceful demonstration.
Surrounded by these people flaunting their flags, shouting abuse, presumably obscenities as well.
Yeah.
Drunk,
sexist abuse as well. Yeah, just.
I mean, people don't need to have too great an imagination to figure out what the heck was going on here. Mm-hmm. And yet you were the ones that got arrested.
Yeah. So what happened essentially was the police came in and they said, I could tell, they were kind of, a bit angry, and they were just like, we're going to have to ask you to move. And we were like, sorry, but we don't feel like we have to move. We're exercising our rights here, very calmly. And then they came back and said, we're asking you to move again. We're like, I'm sorry, but we're just not going to. It's, we're not doing anything wrong. The people around us are the ones that are being abusive. And then he said, well, we'll ask you one more time, or else we're going to have to arrest you. And we said, if you have to arrest us, you have to arrest us, but it's not, we're not doing anything. And they said, okay, so we're going to arrest you. And then, so they took us out the square, and, you know, there was a lot of cheers, obviously, for the police. And then we were taken down a side street because there was too much kind of commotion. And what me and my sister found quite annoying at the time with the police was that they didn't just take us home. I mean, they could have just taken us home at that point, rather than taking us to police station ages away and having us there for the night in separate cells. It just seemed a bit ridiculous, but you know, our spirits were fairly okay anyway. So you know, we felt kind of solidarity with each other and with the movement, and we didn't feel any kind of shame in what had happened. And it was actually only until, I guess, maybe at 4:00 in the morning, I got woken up from my cell to get my prints done and my mug shot. And one of the people at one of the police women there, she was like, do you know that you're circulating online and stuff? And we had no idea that, you know, anyone had taken a photograph of us or anything. We're like, what? They're like, yeah, you're all over the internet at the moment. And we're like, well, I was like, my sister was in a different cell. I was like, really? Oh my God, what? We thought, you know, it was just, you know, a kind of private act of, I suppose, what we were charged with was obstruction of the police, as in not doing what we were told. That fancy way of saying that. And breach of the peace. All that we got acquitted of probably about 8 months later or something, if I remember correctly.
So the charges weren't dropped then?
They were eventually dropped due to kind of a bit of media pressure. Someone started a petition and it got quite a few thousand signatures. And then Arvin Welsh shared it. And then then someone, you know, kind of asked the Procurator Fiscal, like, what is going on? Because we weren't sure if we were going to have to go to court or be fined or whatever. And we were like, you know, it was a bit stressful in that sense.
I'll bet. You know, from 16.
Yeah, it was like, oh God. But
we've got a question here. Somebody says, how did your mum react when she heard about all the spitting and the abuse that you've been?
Well, so it was my dad that picked us up from the police station the next morning, and we came out, you know, with our wee bags, you know, with our shoes and stuff, and he was just like, because both my parents were no voters. So my mum was away in England at the time, and you know, she was pretty angry about the whole situation until we got home and we looked on the internet, and then my dad found it quite funny actually that no, my mum, you know, was much more angry at us for disrupting whatever. I'm not gonna lie, but it was quite strange and surreal.
I think, I mean, we've had loads and loads of comments from people. I mean, Ruthie Dixon says, Scotland will always be proud of you and your sister. The picture is iconic and will always will be, and it will go down in history. Kiss, kiss.
Thanks very much.
This is your fan base tuning in now. For the first time they've had a chance to hear you say and explain your side of things. And I have to tell you, it's a marvelous story, because I'm just not sure everyone fully understands the pressure you were under and how just desperately evil the conditions were. And the fact that you were arrested and the people who were abusing you were allowed to continue, it speaks volumes. The fact that you were able to stay level-headed in that environment as a 16-year-old.
Yeah.
Honestly, you know, it's a tremendous achievement, I must say.
Thank you.
Really, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think the aftermath was pretty intense, particularly as a 16-year-old, because I was in school, obviously, and it polarized a lot of people at school, and a lot of the talk was kind of stupid wee lassie kind of thing. But then there were some people that were like that was really good. So that was quite stressful, really. And to be honest, same with teachers, like, who I'd engaged with discussion before, and then this kind of came out. And that was much more stressful than the kind of, because I had my sister with me who, is, my complete inspiration for lots of things, despite, her flaws. And we were together and we knew what we were doing was perfectly right. But yeah, the aftermath, kind of not being used to any kind of, I know it was kind of like, small media attention, but, within the independence movement, it was, fairly kind of big for a little bit. So that was incredibly stressful. And also being interviewed by the police as well afterwards, and kind of not knowing what was going on. That was probably the worst aspect of it.
I mean, obviously, it was a bit scary at the time, I imagine. I mean, grown men shouting abuse and spitting at you. I mean, as a 16-year-old, that's just, frankly, just beyond the pale. So we've had a question. People are asking, or somebody's asking, sorry, how do you feel about unionists now? I mean, now you've had a chance to, these years after the event, what's your sense of it now?
So I think, there's unionists, and then there's British nationalist kind of bigots. And so I think, some people are unionists for, their own reasons, but some people are blindly unionist. And, I find it difficult to engage in discussion with people that are, even members of my own extended family are. It's not a blind hatred for unionists at all. There's definitely a middle ground there, and there's plenty of people I get along with that don't support Scottish independence. Conservative voters, however, are a little bit harder to get along with.
That's your social activism coming through again. Yeah.
So yeah.
There is a serious point here, and several people have raised it. Ruth Hanratty being one. She says, "What was it about you that so frightened the unionists?"
I think.
What was it?
I think it was a kind of refusal to be intimidated as much as they were attempting to, and I don't know. Maybe you read into it, maybe that's a little bit symbolic of maybe the movement that they're up against. But yeah, I think because we were, young women against so many people, and whatever, we were kind of maybe feeling, or if we'd objectively looked at the situation, it had been a different kind of situation that wasn't so maybe politically charged or whatever, it would have been extremely terrifying. But because we had that kind of faith behind us, I think that probably maybe made people feel a little bit unsettled. I don't know. Maybe that's just conjecture. I'm not sure.
Well, I can see that. Psychologically, it's disconcerting to be confronted by a symbol of what you think you've just beaten. that's maybe part of it, because you think you've won, and all of a sudden, here seems to be some flagrant evidence that might not be the case. In other words, the deal might not be sealed, and that's disgusting for some people, particularly when a few beers and you can't really think terribly straight, or you can't think straight from the very beginning. I don't know, but I could see psychologically. I mean, I'm doing some cod psychology now, which is always to be avoided. There's a question here that and I think this. I want to ask you a question in a second about why you think so many young people are now in favour of independence. I mean, the figures are frankly they're extraordinary. When you look at the opinion polls, when you look at people under 20 and perhaps even under 25, I mean, you're talking in the 70s, sometimes the high 70s, support for independence. So, a question here though from Yes of Bearsden and Mulgai, and the questioner is asking, why do you believe that SNP student and youth groups isolate themselves away from the long-established Scotland-wide SNP branch participation so much, only to be rarely seen to help when well-publicised election and canvassing events occurred? Branches are screaming out for participation of our future generation, but they seem content to do their own thing. How would you respond to that?
Well, as someone that is not an SNP member and never has been, that is maybe slightly difficult for me to say. And I think generally, although a lot of people are, like young people are generally in support for Scottish independence, it often isn't SNP affiliated. I'm certainly not. I'm a socialist myself. But I suppose people will, I think also there's a feeling of when you join a major political party, the SNP has become, there's a little bit of intimidation. Whereas when you're with your peers or when you're within a non-hierarchical group, you maybe feel more comfortable in voicing your opinions and, rather than ones that are already established. I hope that helps answer your question anyway.
Well, I thought you were going to say it's up to the SNP to make themselves amenable to young people. I don't think it has to be, necessarily coming from one direction. But anyway, I think thank you. You answered that, I thought, exceptionally well. Kim Stells is asking, well done, Sophie. I'm desperate to know how your folks stand 6 years on.
Well, very annoyingly, so with the vow kind of debacle, right? What was it? I think maybe 3 days after the referendum, and it was all English votes for English laws. Yeah. My mum was all, maybe I should have voted for independence, and I was like, my dad's come round as well, but it has generally been because, absolute no faith in the Tories. But then again, my parents have started to go towards, much to my annoyance, have gone towards Keir Starmer. And it's quite hard having to move back in with my parents over COVID to skint to, it's quite hard seeing things through a completely different lens from our parents. But specifically on independence, I feel that they would vote for independence now. What they would vote for after independence, I'm not sure.
Well, who knows? I mean, who knows what's on offer after independence? Yeah. I mean, nobody knows. The SNP, as far as I can gather, haven't produced a constitution for independent Scotland, so we don't know what form of state might occur. Your view would be, I assume, unless I'm very much mistaken, you prefer a socialist state.
Absolutely.
And therefore, I suspect maybe that's why you're not terribly enamoured of Keir Starmer.
You could say that, yeah. Funnily enough, one of my friends who had been a long-standing Labour supporter, when you leave a party, especially, Labour, they ask for a reason why, and he was like Keir Starmer and the Rebecca, what's her name, that got expelled from, had to resign, I suppose. Yeah, from the party. Got a reply from his constituent MP saying, I feel like I get a resignation every time Keir Starmer opens his mouth, and in fact I do. It was just quite I don't know. It's sad, but there's no opposition anymore. But people that feel that way, and I think that were the Scottish people that were in favour of Jeremy Corbyn, now feel that since there's no Jeremy Corbyn, there's no chance of kind of good things coming out of the UK, and I suppose a positive way that has made them come more favourably to independence.
Yeah. So going back to the opinion polls, which seem to indicate there's a very large percentage of young people, however you define young, like I say, under 20 and 25, who are, 70% are saying they would be in favour of independence. What do you think the main drive has been that you haven't already covered? I mean, is it a feeling of the UK state has proved itself to be incompetent, or is it the quality of the leadership, or is it the fact that being young, people want to see significant change, not just incremental change, but significant change to address the issues as they perceive them that haven't been addressed to date? Or is it a combination of all of these things and more? What would you say?
Well, I'd say that, of course, it's a combination of things, but I think with the kind of I think possibly before 2014 or 2016, people kind of had the feeling it's always going to be the status quo. But then Brexit happened, and then, the US elections, people feel like, I can actually, there is scope to break out of this. And people that were previously just kind of, fed up, but couldn't be, felt like there was no point in them making a stance, feel that maybe there is, we can actually make a stance now, and that, Brexit happened, why can't Scottish independence happen?
Yeah. I've got a question here, which is slightly different. It's Melanie McCain is asking, what do you think about Kevin Gore's song about you and your sister? Have you heard it?
Yeah, I have. It was really, really lovely. Felt so humbled by that song. It was so kind of. I mean, when I was living in Edinburgh, he used to play. He used to play downstairs at this kind of folk music thing, and me and my sister, one of the most terrifying moments of our life, we spoke at Hope River Fear rally with Tommy Sheridan, and he was backstage, and we got talking and stuff. And honestly, the song is just so lovely. I feel undeserving to have that song. It was amazing to be honoured in that way.
Yeah, tell us a little bit more about being a student, because you're studying what, politics and history?
Yeah, I am.
You're now in your third year.
Yeah.
How many years does a course entail? Is it 4 years? Or?
4 years, yeah.
So are you heading towards your final year now?
Well, after this year, then I'll be heading towards my final year, yeah.
So how do you feel about
it? Obviously, it's an adjustment doing everything online, but I think everything absolutely needs to be online because, not just student safety, but staff safety. really needs to be respected during this time. And, you know, my gripes with the university are definitely not towards the staff, it's towards the kind of money-grabbing management. But yeah, no, it's an adjustment. And I mean, unfortunately, there's problems with some students not being able to, you know, have proper internet connection. And that is, again, like an issue in student halls. But for myself, you know, it kind of is what it is. And to be honest, the staff are doing as much as they can to kind of help us through it. And for a lot of them, you know, quite a lot of them are maybe a little bit technologically challenged. So so they're really trying to like kind of educate themselves and make it as easy as possible. But I'm lucky. I'm, you know, humanities and social science, so it's not like I have kind of physical labs that I can't attend. So
yeah, I did a bachelor's degree in science, and there's no way I could have done that satisfactorily on Zoom. It just wasn't going to happen. I've done some of it, I guess, but not all of it by any means. I'm going to ask you a leading question now, because you sound like you've really studied. You've actually been involved in a political setup. You've seen the best and the worst of people. You ever consider a career in politics?
I've been asked that a few times, and the kind of simple answer is no. If you mean becoming a kind of politician or etc., then absolutely not. What I would like to do, I mean, I made this decision quite a few years ago. I would really, really like to, for one of a better phrases, kick either the government, and if, you know, we are still part of the UK, the Home Office up the arse as hard as I can, I understand. So I'd maybe been a part of a pressure group or some way of being able to do that. And I don't feel that I'm a leader, but I feel that I can help put pressure on certain things to for the better good anyway.
Why do you feel you're not a leader?
I don't know. It's never kind of felt my place. My sister, she could lead however she wanted. I think I'm very much up in my head, so I feel like I could also never be affiliated with a political party, and, you know, lose my own kind of values. And I think that's often what happens when you go into politics. Not always, but it's not for me. What I'd like to do is make a difference and help organizations that, you know, I'm already kind of a part of. And, you know, I'm much better at debating one-on-one or debating one-on, you know, three rather than debating to the world, I find.
Well, you know something, you know, it's a reasonable question to ask, because people are looking at this picture and that looks a lot like leadership, I have to say. That looks a lot like leadership. What is leadership? Leadership surely is having the courage of your convictions and the cojones, if I can use that term, to step up to the plate, mixing all my metaphors disgracefully now, stepping up to the plate and saying, this is what I believe in, this is what I stand for, this is what's important, and I respect you might feel differently to other people, but I want to explain this to you. That, to a large extent, that's where leadership stems from. I mean, if you're studying history, you've looked at people like, I assume, like Martin Luther King, you've looked at people from the American Revolution. Many of them, frankly, were not at all disposed to standing up in front of people and declaiming. They just felt that when they looked around, there wasn't anyone else doing what needed to be done. And so they said, okay, I'm going to screw my courage to the max, and I'm going to step up there and I'm going to say my pieces, because it's important that these pieces are said.
Absolutely. And I you know, if there's some, you know, and there's many things that I believe in, like full-heartedly, that, you know, I want to stand up and project. However, I think what comes to mind when you say politician would be like a member of parliament, or, you know, an MSP, that I wouldn't be able to do. I find that, so, you know, I'm a member of a revolutionary socialist group, and direct action. I think especially now when, you know, you've got Labour against the kind of right. So you've got right Labour against right Tories. It's basically grassroots, and direct action is basically our way of doing so, and, you know, all under one banner, etc. is fantastic. And organising people like that, and, you know, I always want to be extremely involved in these things, but in terms of kind of leading, I don't know, maybe a party or something like that, or being part of a party into a system that I don't believe in.
Okay.
It's not for me.
Apart from Tommy Sheridan, what other politicians do you admire?
So obviously, I even though I'm not fully behind SNP, Mary Black was just fantastic when she got elected. I just thought she was brilliant young woman, speaking her mind and having, you know, she was just fantastic.
Have you met with her?
Oh no, that sounds amazing.
Yeah. You should meet with her, I guess. You should give her a call and say, I'd like to meet up with you.
Yeah.
I think we've asked her on the show, by the way, but we just can't find a time.
Yeah.
We're still looking. We'd still like to have her as a guest.
Yeah. No,
and then you could get a question to her.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. Also,
Black and Tommy, who else do you admire?
Patrick Harvey. I think that he, you know, I met him once as well. I used to be a member of the Green Party, and Ross Greer, he's like a, you know, a very young person when he was elected. I spoke to him before as well. You know, Jeremy Corbyn is one of those people that, you know, I absolutely respect in lots of ways, but, you know, in other things, you know, he kind of loses the mark. But I feel like what he did was kind of stand up for, you know, the good. Unfortunately, that didn't extend to Scottish independence, but, you know, as a person, I think for good. I suppose not a politician, but someone that I do really admire as a kind of political commentator and academic, because Noam Chomsky, I think he's some of his commentary on what's going on in the world is absolutely fantastic. So yeah, I suppose that's my kind of icons, really.
So picture yourself for a second. It's not today. It's not COVID. It's 2 years from now. What picture do you see of Scotland at that point, 2 years from now? Assuming COVID is over and done with.
Well, I suppose, I'm not going to lie, I think that the SNP are going to wait a little bit. And I think that in about 2 years' time, the real independence campaign will be either kicking off or finishing. And so I don't see that we'll have smoothed everything out by then. And do you know what? It's going to be, once we do become independent, which I think is inevitable, I think there's going to be a period of kind of economical unrest and so on. But I think if we look forward maybe 10 years, I think we'll see the beginning of like a blossoming new independent nation that has so much potential and has tackled a lot of the social injustices that have been put upon us by Westminster largely. So
it's interesting you say that, because there's a lot of research into nations that become independent, and some states, some countries fail. They are failed states. They become independent, and that's it. Everything goes to hell. Others do exceptionally well, and that also applies to states within states. If you compare, for example, Detroit with Seattle, they both came from the same place. They lost their industries. In the case of Detroit, it was the car industry. In the case of Seattle, it was the aircraft industry. But Seattle completely transformed itself. And when the researchers went looking to see why Seattle didn't end up like Detroit, you know what the answer was?
What? The people? Education. Yeah, and we've got fantastic education.
Exactly.
And also we have a very much, in general, like a spirit of inclusion and progression in Scotland. And I think that will certainly help us become a really, really fantastic, well-functioning nation. We've got a complete spirit of kindness and, hope for the future. And I think that's what will kind of eventually carry us to like a really fantastic working nation.
Yeah. One thing that I ask most guests, because it's still a source of some confusion. If you look around at independence movements across Europe, and you studied history and you studied politics, you know how very rare it is for there to be no right-wing independence movement in a country. I mean, generally speaking, if you look at most, I assume you'll agree, if not, tell me. If you look at most countries that are striving towards independence, there's usually a right-wing independence party. There may well be some left-wing parties. In Scotland, that's not the case. There isn't even a centre-right party in favour of independence. Every single party is left-wing in Scotland that supports independence. Every single one. Why do you think that is?
I think because I think the main driving force for Scottish independence is not about, we're wealthy and we want to keep hold of our wealth. It's more of we want a fair society and we are being held back from that. We're being subjugated and being told that, we can't have that and we can't make the decisions that we want to make, so that, people can live, more positive lives. So yeah, I think that's about the crux of it. It's not
you would expect the right wing to say, just from the point of view of self-preservation, to say we'd like a presence in independent Scotland. If you leave it till independence, then it's going to be just an almighty scramble, and the whole the likely administration in an independent Scotland, certainly initially, would almost certainly be with left wing. There's no question about that, because there's no right wing presence to speak of. Anyway, no doubt we can talk about that in greater length. Is it? We're just about to close off now. I did tell you it would go fast, didn't I?
Yeah, it did, surprisingly. Yeah.
Just like that. We're almost through. We've just got a couple of minutes. Is there any message that you would like to give all the folks in the audience watching and listening?
I just say keep up the faith. I mean, I know it was a horrible time. It's trying for all of us, but some more than most. And, if we strive towards like an independent Scotland, maybe we won't have such harsh inequalities as we do just now, and even better, have a sort of utopia where the Tories don't have such a high presence and we're able to do what we like for a fair society.
Well, right now they wouldn't have any presence because there's no right-wing party. But seriously, a big thank you to you, Sophie. And
my absolute pleasure.
It's been great, and I've really enjoyed it, and I guarantee you that everybody watching and listening has done too. And a big thank you to everyone else out there watching. We really appreciate your support, and we hope you've enjoyed the show. As ever, we've got a formidable list of guests lined up. Next week, it's going to be another cracking show, very different from Sophie, very different. We've got Andy McIver. Andy was a big player in the Better Together team. We're reaching right outside the silo now, it says. And I think so. Get your questions in now for Andy when the nation talks to him next week. Oh, and by the way, look out for the Constitution column, please, in the Sunday National. It's been written by my colleague, Dr. Elliot Bulmer, and nobody talks more science on constitutions than Elliot, I can guarantee you. And very importantly, please support IndyLive. And if you like the TNT show, let us know. We always like to hear from you. And thanks again for joining us, and a very good night to all of you. And remember, it's been a great day for British democracy. Good night, all.
Never miss a live stream. The What's On guide to live stream events and shows now has its own website. You can find the guide at whatsonguide.scot, independencelive.net, or on multiple Facebook pages. Do you create your own live stream events and shows? Get them registered on the guide. See whatsonguide.scot for full details.
This is a new voice for a new Scotland.
We know you're busy people, so most of our shows are also on demand on our Scottish Independence podcast channel, available wherever you get your podcasts. You'll see what a great variety of shows we have. There's something for everyone. Our newest on-demand platform is IndyLive Radio's YouTube channel. We've set up playlists for our most popular shows and current topics, currency, disc parties. New content is added almost daily, so subscribe and you won't miss anything. Join us. Thanks for listening.
IndyLive.radio.
Never miss a live stream. The What's On guide to live stream events and shows now has its own website. You can find the guide at whatsonguide.scot, independencelive.net, or on multiple Facebook pages. Do you create your own live stream events and shows? Get them registered on the guide. See whatsonguide.scot for full details.
And to me, that's the clear blue water between staying in the UK and going for independence. It's clear, regardless of what Boris Johnson said the other day, that they will want to go back to business as usual, where the ultra-rich are the ones who gain from everything. We don't want to be part of that. We want the chance to actually build a fairer country.
But I don't think anybody who's gone over to Yes now is really for moving, because I think they can see clear as day what things look like. And I always felt that during the independence referendum that it would take a no vote in order for a lot of Scots to realise the consequences of voting no. They would have to see what happens when they vote no in order to realise what a mistake it was.
You can watch this again, you can be part of it. It's Independence Live. Yeah. A few people asked about YouTube. It'll be YouTube/Independence Live. That's where you'll find the footage.
Never miss a live stream. The What's On guide to live stream events and shows now has its own website. You can find the guide at whatsonguide.scot, independencelive.net, or on multiple Facebook pages. Do you create your own live stream events and shows? Get them registered on the guide. See whatsonguide.scot for full details.
Here we are, it's the Yakin Bridge where we started the first 500 miles. In front of that beast there. This is where it all started. We're now in day 4 and we're heading towards Port 3. We'll see he's on the road. Sign the covenant. Long walk to freedom. Talk to you later.
Hi there, I'm Cliff.
And I'm Russ.
And we're from the Veterans for Scottish Independence 2.0 group. And we're just invading your privacy today to let you know that we will be very shortly pushing a programme out on live stream to do with the veterans, their needs as it will be during an independent campaign. The next independence campaign, and indeed in an independent Scotland.
So get yourself in gear, come and join us, pull up a sandbag.
Yes.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Wherever you stand, get the fresh view of what's happening in Scotland with iScot. Celebrate everything about our country with intelligent, in-depth insight from lifestyle, culture to puzzles, and all the opinions you'll need. Whether it's digital or by post, subscribe now to iScot.
It's a song I wrote about 5 minutes ago called Carpe Diem, Hope Over Fear. Are you threatened by words from an empire of money and gold? Will you trade in your country's potential for the lies you've been sold? Are you scared that the walls are too high to be breached by the bold? Will you stand and be counted, or shut up and do what you're told? Hope over fear, don't be afraid. Tell Westminster Tories that Scotland's no longer your slave. Carpe diem, will you seize the day? Rip the chains from the unicorn, Scotland's no longer your slave. Did the TV man call you a nationalist for rejecting the lies? Are the wobbs of the few off the bob cause they wear shirts and ties? When they tell you that Scotland's no great, are you really surprised? Will you stand and be counted for something that money can't buy? Hope over fear, don't be afraid. Tell Westminster Tories that Scotland's no longer your slave. Carpe diem, will you seize the day? Rip the chains from the unicorn, Scotland's no longer your slave. Happy that nuclear weapons are dumped on the Clyde, fighting wars for the wealth of the few. How many have died? You can bury my bones, but the truth of it can't be denied. Will you stand and be counted, cause I'll be there stood by your side. Hope over fear, don't be afraid. Tell Westminster Tories that Scotland's no longer your slave. Carpe diem, will you seize the day? Rip the chains from the unicorn, Scotland's no longer your slave. Will the media tell you that England don't want you to go? And the taxpayer-funded MPs tell you just tell them no. No! But in Manchester, Nottingham, Sheffield, they already know that they're fighting for them, and it's only the start of the show. Ha ha! Hope over fear, don't be afraid. Tell Westminster Tories that Scotland's no longer your slave. Carpe diem, my friend, will you seize the day? With the chains from the unicorn, Scotland's no longer your slave. Vote yes for a future. Hope over fear.